A sword tap on the shoulder, a few noble words, instant transformation into a chivalric warrior. Hollywood's knighting ceremonies are elegant, brief, and purely symbolic. Real knighting ceremonies were multi-day religious ordeals involving fasting, ritual bathing, all-night vigils, humiliating physical tests, expensive gift-giving, and public performances designed to bankrupt candidates while binding them through sacred oaths and social debt. The ceremony wasn't just about becoming a knight, it was about demonstrating you could afford to be one. Stand through an actual 13th century knighting ceremony and you'd experience something far more complex and expensive than a simple sword tap. Once you understand what really happened, every movie coronation scene becomes sanitized fiction that ignores the religious, financial, and social pressures that made knighthood as much about wealth display as military capability. Stand with a squire preparing for knighting in 1250 and you'd watch him spending months arranging finances for the ceremony itself. The knighting wasn't free, it required expensive purchases, gifts, feasts, and displays that many eligible men couldn't afford. You'd see squires delaying knighthood for years because they lacked the funds for proper ceremony. The equipment requirements were substantial. You'd watch candidates needing to provide their own armor, a full suit worth 10 to 20 years of peasant wages. New clothes for the ceremony, fine wool or silk garments dyed in expensive colors, a warhorse worth another 10 to 15 years of labor, weapons including lance, sword, and mace. The material requirements alone put knighthood beyond reach of all but wealthy families. The gifts to witnesses and participants added costs. You'd see candidates expected to provide presents to the lord conferring knighthood, to fellow knights attending, to squires assisting. The gifts range from money to horses to jewelry. All expensive, all required by custom. Refusing these gifts meant social disgrace that could follow you for life. The feast requirements could bankrupt families. You'd watch newly knighted warriors expected to host elaborate celebrations with abundant food and wine for potentially hundreds of guests. The feast announced your new status, but also your wealth. A shabby feast suggested poverty that undermined your knightly credibility before it even began. The timing considerations were strategic. You'd see men seeking knighthood before major campaigns when lords needed cavalry and might waive some costs, or after successful campaigns when plunder made the ceremony affordable. Some waited until inheriting family estates provided sufficient income. The financial barrier meant many capable fighters never became knights simply because they couldn't afford the ceremony. Knighting ceremonies required a wealth display that served as a financial barrier, making knighthood explicitly a rich man's club regardless of military capability. Stand in a chapel on the night before your knighting and you'd experience the vigil, an all-night religious ordeal designed to exhaust you physically while testing your spiritual commitment. This wasn't symbolic, it was a genuinely difficult test that some candidates failed. The ritual bathing came first. You'd watch candidates being washed in blessed water, the bathing symbolizing spiritual purification. The bath wasn't a private luxury, it was supervised by clergy who ensured proper ritual observance. You'd be naked before priests and witnesses, the vulnerable, intentional part of humbling yourself before God and the church. The confession had to be complete. You'd spend hours confessing every sin to a priest, knowing that dying in sin after becoming a knight meant eternal damnation. The confession wasn't brief acknowledgement, it was comprehensive spiritual accounting that could take several hours depending on your past. The priest's absolution was required before proceeding. The vigil itself lasted all night. You'd kneel before the altar in full armor, keeping watch over your weapons which had been blessed and laid on the altar. You couldn't sit, couldn't lie down, couldn't leave. Prayer was expected, specific prayers at canonical hours every 3 hours. You'd be exhausted by dawn, the physical suffering considered necessary preparation for martial hardship. The symbolic death and rebirth was explicit. You'd watch the ritual treating you as dying to your old life and being reborn as a knight. Some ceremonies included lying in tomb-like spaces. The religious symbolism was heavy. You were dying to sin and rising as Christian warrior, parallel to Christ's death and resurrection. The fast was mandatory. You go 24+ hours without food, only water permitted. The hunger combined with exhaustion from the all-night vigil meant you'd be physically weakened by the actual knighting ceremony. This wasn't accidental. The ordeal proved your commitment and made the ceremony's relief more significant. The religious vigil was a genuine ordeal designed to exhaust and humble candidates, not a symbolic gesture, but a difficult test of physical and spiritual endurance. Stand in the Great Hall at dawn after your vigil and watch the knighting ceremony unfold as a complex public performance with multiple symbolic elements and binding legal oaths. This wasn't a simple sword tap, it was an elaborate ritual that took hours and involved the entire noble community. The investiture with symbols began the ceremony. You'd receive spurs, marking mounted status, sword belt, and sword in specific order. Each item came with prayers and blessings from clergy. The Lord conferring knighthood would explain the symbolic meaning of each item. Spurs for riding to battle, belt for binding you to knightly code, sword for defending faith and punishing evildoers. The collé or dubbing was the famous moment, but not the whole ceremony. You'd feel the Lord striking your neck or shoulder, not a gentle tap, but a real blow meant to hurt. Some ceremonies used a fist instead of a sword. The blow symbolized both the hardship of knightly service and was said to be the last blow you'd receive without retaliating. You were expected to take it without flinching. The oath-taking was legally binding. You'd swear specific oaths to defend the church, protect widows and orphans, uphold justice, serve your Lord faithfully. These weren't suggestions. They were legal obligations that could be enforced through courts and loss of knighthood. You'd be swearing before God, clergy and witnesses who'd hold you accountable. The public witness aspect was critical. You'd see dozens or hundreds of witnesses present specifically to remember your oaths and hold you to them. The ceremony's publicity made your promises binding through social pressure. Breaking knightly vows meant public disgrace witnessed by everyone who mattered in your social world. The accolade formula varied by region and period. You'd hear different words in different ceremonies, but common themes emerged. Be thou a knight, or rise, sir, name, marking the transformation. The words carried weight beyond their simplicity. They changed your legal status, social position, and obligations permanently. The Mass following the ceremony reinforced religious dimensions. You'd participate in Catholic Mass where your new knight status was acknowledged by the Church, receiving communion as knight rather than squire. The religious sanction added sacred authority to your new position. The ceremony was a complex public ritual with legal, religious, and social dimensions, creating binding obligations and announcing new status to the entire community. Stand as a newly knighted warrior immediately after the ceremony and you'd face financial reality. You were probably deeply in debt from the ceremony costs. The knighting created financial obligations that could take years to satisfy. The immediate expenses were staggering. You'd have spent the equivalent of several years' income on ceremony requirements, equipment, gifts, feast, clothing, payments to various participants. Most new knights borrowed heavily from family, moneylenders, or their lords to cover these costs. The repayment pressure shaped early knightly career. You'd see newly knighted warriors seeking military service specifically to earn money to pay debts. The ransom opportunities and plunder from campaigns weren't just about getting rich, they were about becoming financially solvent after the ceremony bankrupted you. The political debts were as significant as financial ones. You'd owe favours to everyone who'd helped with ceremony costs or attended as witnesses. These obligations created networks of mutual dependency that shaped your entire career. The Lord who'd knighted you had a claim on your service. The knights who'd attended expected future support. The ongoing costs of maintaining knightly status never stopped. You'd need to keep expensive armor maintained, replace war horses when they died, maintain a household appropriate to your rank, and host other knights when they visited. The initial ceremony was just the beginning of an expensive lifestyle that many knights struggled to maintain. The social pressure to display wealth continued. You'd be expected to participate in tournaments, expensive, host feasts, dress appropriately, maintain visible prosperity. A knight who looked poor faced ridicule that damaged his reputation and ability to find military employment or marriage alliances. The financial burden of knighting created debts that shaped careers, making warfare economically necessary to maintain status that ceremony had just granted. Stand at the Battle of Bannockburn, 1314, and watch Robert the Bruce knighting dozens of men in the field using an abbreviated ceremony. No vigils, no elaborate ritual, just quick oaths and sword strikes. The mass knightings revealed that elaborate ceremony was luxury, not necessity, when military needs demanded immediate cavalry forces. The battlefield knightings occurred before major battles. You'd see commanders creating knights from capable squires who'd proven themselves but lacked ceremony. The abbreviated ritual, sometimes just the dubbing and oath, took minutes instead of days. Robert the Bruce knighted 500 men before Bannockburn specifically to increase cavalry numbers. The economic motivations were transparent. You'd watch lords knighting men right before campaigns, often waiving ceremony costs, because they needed cavalry and couldn't afford to lose capable warriors to financial barriers. The military necessity overrode ceremonial traditions when armies needed immediate reinforcement. The debt relief for mass knightings was an implicit bargain. You'd see men accepting battlefield knighting knowing they'd owe military service, but wouldn't face the crippling debt of proper ceremony. The lords got soldiers, the men got status without bankruptcy. Both sides benefited from a simplified process. The social status of battlefield knights was ambiguous. You'd watch some nobles questioning whether abbreviated knightings carried full legitimacy. The lack of proper ceremony created questions about whether these men were real knights or just military promotions. The debates revealed how much the elaborate ceremony mattered for social acceptance. Post-war regularization happened frequently. You'd see men knighted quickly before battle, seeking proper ceremonies later when they could afford them, retroactively adding the religious and social elements that legitimized their status among traditional nobility. Mass battlefield knightings revealed ceremony was negotiable when military needs demanded, but also showed how much proper ceremony mattered for social legitimacy. Stand in different European regions, and you'd see significant variations in knighting ceremonies that revealed local customs and priorities. The basic elements remained, but details changed dramatically based on location and period. The French ceremonies emphasized religious dimensions most heavily. You'd watch elaborate masses, extensive prayers, multiple priests involved in every stage. The spiritual transformation was a central concern. Becoming knight meant becoming a soldier of Christ more than achieving social status. The English ceremonies focused more on feudal obligations. You'd see detailed oath swearing about service to lord and king. The military and political dimensions of knighthood dominated over purely religious aspects, though religious elements remained present. The German ceremonies incorporated pre-Christian elements longer than other regions. You'd watch symbolic combat, ritual challenges, tests of strength and courage that predated Christianity. The mixture of pagan and Christian elements created a unique ceremonial style. The Spanish ceremonies during Reconquista emphasized crusading. You'd see knightings explicitly framing new knights as warriors for Christianity against Islam. The ceremony connected personal advancement to a broader religious military project that dominated Iberian politics for centuries. The Italian city-states developed modified ceremonies reflecting republican rather than feudal values. You'd watch ceremonies emphasizing service to the city rather than to individual lords. The adaptation showed how knighting customs evolved to fit different political structures. The timeline evolution changed ceremonies substantially. You'd see 11th century knightings being simple affairs focused on military capability. By the 13th century, they'd become elaborate religious social spectacles. By the 15th century, they were sometimes avoided because costs had become prohibitive and military relevance was declining. Regional and temporal variations showed knighting was an adaptable tradition shaped by local priorities. Not universal, unchanging ritual, but custom that evolved with political and military needs. Movies show simple sword taps creating instant knights. Real ceremonies were multi-day ordeals combining religious suffering, public oath-taking, expensive gift-giving, and social bonding that created binding obligations and announced new status. Hollywood ignores the financial barriers that made knighthood explicitly class-based regardless of capability. Real knighting required wealth most men didn't have, making the ceremony itself a demonstration that you belonged to a wealthy elite. Military skill was secondary to ability to afford the ceremony. Films show knighting as a purely positive transformation. Reality was that the ceremony created crushing debts that shaped entire careers. The honor came with financial obligations many new knights spent years trying to satisfy. Movies make ceremonies seem uniform. Real knighting varied dramatically by region, period, and circumstance, from elaborate multi-day spectacles to hasty battlefield promotions. The variations revealed that the ceremony was negotiable based on military and economic pressures. Hollywood treats the religious elements as brief symbolic gestures. Real medieval people took the spiritual dimensions seriously. The confession, vigil, and sacred oaths were genuinely difficult ordeals meant to bind you to God and church as much as to military service. Modern people romanticize knighting as simple recognition of merit. Stand through the actual ceremony and you'd see a complex social ritual designed to bind you through debt, oaths and public witness, creating obligations that lasted lifetimes while bankrupting you in the process. Medieval knighting was an expensive social ritual creating binding obligations. Not simple recognition of merit, but an elaborate system for controlling who entered the warrior elite and binding them through sacred and financial chains.